Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deana. It's great to see you today. It is the hump day. Before I forget something so important to our schedule, Friday. Friday, not Friday. Make sure you make a mental note of this and help remind me too to post this all over the place. I'm going to run cocktail night, gallery night on Sunday night. And I've done that before. I did that a few weeks ago just because of the way the calendar was shaking out. It's going to be another one of those times that I need to run gallery night, cocktail night on Sunday, not a show on Friday. Because I realized Friday is a show in Art Open in it's Hartford. I think it's Hartford at the Charter Oak. Of the artist Pierre Sylvain. And if you are in our Facebook group, which is Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club, you know his work. It is stellar and amazing. And I missed the last thing that he did because I was teaching on that day and I had screwed up the dates, so I can't possibly miss this. I need to get out there and support him because he is a rug. He does a lot of different mediums, but he is in huge part a rug artist. So I'm going to be taking pictures and just being there will be such a treat. So that's on Friday night. And I will be with you for gallery night, cocktail night on Sunday night this week. So make sure you're sending me your stuff. I want to see it and I want to include it in the show. And I'm looking forward to that just on a different day. All right, let's see. So dreary here today. I'm telling you, I'm like just losing my mind. Too late. It's gone. Completely gone. It's brightening up a little bit, but man, it's been just hammering clouds and rain lately. Shannon, I have to go get your linen today. Don't think I have forgotten. I'm going to be picking up the linen from Michelle Micarelli, and she was teaching this past week on Cape Cod, right at the Cranberry something. I forget what it's called, but she should be home, so I should be able to swing by. Good to see you. And Robin, great to see you. Ryan, great to see you. I'm getting those boxes out too. These advent calendars, the hardest thing about them, I mean, it's just hard, isn't it? It's like building 24 boxes, taping them up at the top and the bottom, filling them with a little bag with something different in each one, taping that up, getting them in there. The hardest part of this whole exercise is finding boxes to put this 24-piece village in once I'm done. You would think this would be this would be the easy part. It's the hard part. I've been checking dumpsters, like outside of stores, but because it's been raining so long, everything's wet. I will figure it out. I'm going to get them out in the next couple of days because they're ready to blow. It's just a frustrating but fun task, right? It's all for the good. Linda H., good to see you in Massachusetts. Stephanie in sunny Arizona. It's always sunny in Arizona, isn't it? It sounds so good. Karen, great to see you in Black Forest, Colorado. You are on your elliptical. Good girl. I've been skipping again this week. I have just not been in a good place. Continued, sustained. Last week I had a little bit of like vim in me, and this week no. No. April, good to see you. Cousin, I registered for Sauder this morning. That's a great question. Is anyone else going to Sauder 2023? I'm sure that I am going. I'm probably not going to stay there for no reason other than I like to be on the move. But I know, good thing that you said that, April, because from come on, the Barachois Church in Nova Scotia comes to Sauder this year the 50 state project of the cushions that are on the pews of that beautiful church in Nova Scotia. Everybody who's made pillows, the pillows will be on display. So the 50 American states as pillows will be on display. And I'm super excited about that because while I fully intend to do Nova Scotia this year, assuming COVID and all that is well under control and continues to be well under control, I'm looking forward to seeing my pillows because I did Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and yeah, I can't even remember if they were good or not. But I'd love to see them and I'd love to see everybody else's. So I will be there and I'm going to be following the thread to see who else will be there. But I probably won't book at the place because I'm a big one for like seedy chain motels and things like that. I like to be out there having some little pre-made cocktails in some crappy hotel room somewhere. And I'll probably only be there for a day or two, all things considered, but it is something to look forward to and it is time to register. So if that's something that you have in your mind and you are thinking, I want to stay at Sauder, you know that it's like a finite space situation. So you really should get booked if that's the plan. before it is fully booked, and then that's a different problem, right? It's far to project forward, but in this case, you must project forward. Sharon, great to see you. Really curious about these bird rugs. They are beautiful. Sharon Grant. No, not Sharon. I'm so sorry. Come on, come on, come on. What is wrong with me? Sandra. As soon as I opened my phone, boom, Sandra Grant. And I met her not that long ago. We'll do that in a second. I've met her a few times. She is such a lovely, lovely person. What do they have going on in Vermont there that the rugs are coming out so grand? It's like a hornet's nest of talent. It reminds me of, like, 19th century Concord, Mass, with like all of the great writers in one place at one time, or Bloomsbury in London. It's like there's a hornet's nest of great rug makers in Vermont. They must all be feeding off of each other in terms of inspiration. And the nice thing about it is they're nice. Like, they're so nice. All of these ladies are so nice. It just gives you a good feeling, doesn't it? Not standoffish at all. Everybody was so nice. In fact, when Kaz and I were here at the Green Mountain Show that we'd look at Sandra's rugs, it was remarkable how nice everyone was. And it was Kaz's first time coming to New England. And you know how in New England there is this weird stigma that New Englanders are so cold. Like, we have that Puritan thing, like, locked in. I guess to some extent we do. I know that I do. But everybody was so nice. People just talking in restaurants, strangers. Everybody spoke to us. Everybody was friendly. And I was so proud at that moment, particularly to be a New Englander, because Kaz was like, everybody is so nice. And I said, well, yes, what were you expecting? We're not animals. We are super nice people. They were especially nice in Vermont, I have to say. It was such fun. Mom, good to see you. We did get the first snow overnight. It was more of a taunt, right? It was like the wintry mix came late. Well, while I was picking the kids up from karate, the wintry mix struck. And I went inside and said into the studio, oh my God, it's snowing outside. And all the kids went crazy and went to the door. But by the time they went to the door, the wintry mix was over. And they were like, it's not snowing. I said, it absolutely was snowing. And then as soon as we pulled away, it was snowing again, just in time for me to be driving home through it, Wintry mix, it is that time of year. We can't complain, right? Linda B., great to see you. And Mom, it was your birthday yesterday. It was my mom's birthday yesterday on the 15th, so happy belated birthday. Exciting. There's a cluster of birthdays right in the next week. And if your birthday's coming up, let us know too so we can shout out happy birthday for sure. Sandy, hello from Trinidad. How exciting and exotic is that? You are so welcome. Great to see you. And Jane is in Wales, from dark and gloomy Wales, but so idyllic, right? Idyllic and pastoral. Carol, great to see you in Wisconsin. And Beverly, are you not feeling that well today? Well, that's okay. When you're not feeling well, you have to be lazy, right? But I'm sorry that you're not feeling well, because you are usually a wild firecracker. But we're going to have to save that for tomorrow, right? Cat's Gallery, great to see you. Andrea, great to see you. Oh, Michelle R., cold and sunny North Carolina. Feels like it's finally fall. Yep. Oh, it's giving way, isn't it? It's giving way fast. Joy, great to see you. Oh, good. We've got a lot of buddies on today, and some buddies I don't see all the time, so that's exciting. Robin, I'm not sure if I said hi yet. Okay, so Robin says, you yourself, Carol, Gail, and Kaz are talking about solder. Well, I hope that you go. I mean, I'm certainly going to go because I want to see the exhibits. And I want to coordinate with anybody I know who's going. It would be great to get together for sure. Dave, great to see you in Toronto. Crystal, great to see you in Halifax. Oh, good. There's lots of buddies on today. Sia, good to see you in Greece. In Greece, that's right. Welcome. Very international group today. It is great to see you. It is a great show today because I'm going back into that wonderful Hooked in the Mountains exhibit, the Green Mountains in Montpelier, Vermont. When we've looked at it thus far, we've talked about mostly Grace Collette, because we were looking at her work for a cocktail night, and it kind of spilled over into Monday because it was so much to discuss. And it brought us to the subject of many new things that we don't always talk about, lots of different kinds of applique onto the surface of your hooking projects. That is so exciting, opening that world up. In fact, as soon as I'm finished with these calendars and catch up a little bit, I'm going to be sewing those little ornaments onto my tree. And I want to talk more about that project and come up with some other projects for us that are like that. Patreon members, thank you. I want to send you an email. I just got to get these Advent calendars out. It's really pressing on me violently at this point. Happy birthday to all the fellow Scorpios. That's right. Yeah, Dave, your birthday was recently too. So one of the other exhibits that was huge and important and completely consuming at the Green Mountain Rug Show was the Sandra Grant exhibit. And she does a lot with birds. She does a lot with animals in general, but today we're looking at the birds because part of the exhibit was a series of animals, and I want to talk about that next time. So we're going to look at that next week. But I want to focus on her birds because birds are really what she's known for. If you have seen her work in Rug Cooking Magazine or you have seen her work out in the world, out in galleries, she shows a lot. Last time I taught at Mad River. It's a yarn store and mill on the Mad River. I think it's in Waitsville, Vermont, if that sounds right. It was beautiful. It was a great class, super overfull class. It was super dynamic and exciting and energized. And Sandra came at the end of the class to say hi and introduce herself. So I got to meet her then. And at that point, I got to look at some of her work because some of it was hanging at the place where I was teaching. And there was more of it down the road in a gallery, and I so hoped that I would make it there. But it was one of these crazy situations where the gallery wasn't open the next day. And then the following day I was leaving, but they were open at 2, and it was quite far. So I had to move on. And I was very happy to be able to look at her work in detail at the Green Mountain Show in Montpelier. So as a sort of introduction to her work, she does very realistic birds, really beautiful. And she has, in her own way and like no one I've ever seen before, it's like if Mary Oliver, the poet, also was a rug hooker, right? It's like she's combined this great passion for being a sort of naturalist, and she must take tons of walks and see all of these birds out in the wild, tracking them, knowing them, remembering them, recording them in this special way by hooking them. And like Grace Collette, the two of them are both big ones for using all kinds of different techniques. So this is why I say, is this a Bloomsbury thing? Is this a Vermont thing? What is going on here? Wait till you see what I mean. It is just over the top, such a sort of potpourri mix of techniques in single pieces. It's extraordinary. Let's come over and see. I'll get my commentary ready too. We'll see how far we get. And let's start. You know what? Okay, yep, let's start. I had some other people at the beginning, but I'm going to start with Sandra Grant because that's where we're starting talking. So this was like the entry image, right, to get into the alcove that was completely her own exhibit. So the two featured artists were Sandra Grant and Grace Collette, just to give you an idea of the scale. And there were hundreds more rugs, but these were the artists who were featured this time. This piece is called, now I should have said, are you firmly seated on your chair? Is there any chance that you might fall off? Because these are extraordinary works. Jay, can you put the heat down a little bit? I feel like I'm going to expire. I'm not really sure what the right number to put the heat is at, but it definitely is not like 79. Okay, so this piece is called Spirits of the Lake. Now, my word, what is happening here? Let me see if I can read. Yeah, I took some really shaky pictures of the text. So in some cases, she's describing some of the techniques. Let's just do that ourselves as we look. I have several shots of this enormous and important hooked piece. So what is going on here? She has got Waldoboro, and remember, Waldoboro is when you are hooking at a height and then clipping it back and making it three-dimensional, kind of like a lot of rugs that you see that looks, sculpted on the floor. It's very high relief in this case. And she has added, in terms of applique, lots of beads and things like that. She uses a lot of velvet, sari ribbon, but she's actually using bird feathers. And I think this is part of this, like, just indescribable beauty of her pieces, is that she is working in real elements of the birds. They're little feathers that I'm sure she finds all over the place. So if you look at the background of this, you fell off the chair. I know. I mean, in person, because the plaque is out of focus on my camera, and that's me being stupid and not having the right glasses on. This was a huge piece. I would say this was, I would say at least 4 feet wide, that kind of a size. So it is a vast piece. In the background, it is hard to say, and it didn't note on the written part, right? Because if it did, I would have read it and registered it. You know how when you see a background like this, we are talking in terms of how was it done? We're talking about one of two things. Either you have got color changing wool, right? Sort of ombre, but color changing from one color to the next, and you are very strategically hooking it so it looks softly pulled, almost like a woven, almost like Bargello, or you are hooking an all-white background and using paints to paint the loops after it's hooked. For me, I'm guessing it's the second, but I can't be sure. It is absolutely incredible. Let's look at it a little bit closer up. So you see what I mean? It is quite hard to tell. This looks to me painted. I could be wrong, but quite a few of hers look painted. It's just hard to tell. I welcome your opinions for sure. It is so softly drawn in terms of the color transitioning. The shifts are so subtle and gradual that I find it impossible to think that this could have been done by sort of expertly looping in pre-ombre painted materials. That's my opinion. You see, she also has some kind of, not metallic, but kind of holographic, shiny white on the far left. That's really helping. The different luster, right? The different, because wool is very flat. It absorbs color like, you know, nothing else. Maybe silk and wool absorb color the best in terms of material. But in terms of luster, wool has a very dull luster. So when you see something that really pops against it, like the shiny stuff, and this is obviously a wall piece, right? Nobody is standing on this. So if you see stuff like this at Joann's or Michael's, you know that you can get this holographic, transparent, whatever stuff, and you can hook it into your pieces. And if it feels too thin and flimsy, just use a carrier with it, which is another strip of the same size. Just hook them together so it has a little bit more body, a little more integrity. But go with it. You need this kind of shine against the dullness of the wool. This piece is anything but dull. Now, notice how she's using with the small chicks, if that's what they're called. It looks like either pure curls. It's not roving. I think it's curls, right? And a lot of people hook with curls. If you got the advent calendar from me, in one of the days, you have a giant overflowing bag of colorful curls, like as stuffed as I could stuff it. And man, can I stuff it. So curls are wonderful to use for stuff like this. I mean, it gives you that great three-dimensional quality. It gives you that softness. It is a great translator of what the subject is, which in this case is these downy little birds. Notice how with the adult birds, she is using clipped loops, right? So for Jane, everybody in the UK or Europe, you might say clippy. In the US, it's still rug hooking, but we make the distinction that it's clipped and not looped. In other words, you're pulling up loops same as you would always, maybe a little bit higher, and then once you pull them up, you're clipping them. Are they going to fall out? No, they're not going to fall out because there's stuff on all sides of them. They're packed in together and they're holding each other up. They're never going to fall out. But clippy is a nice effect. You see how it gives that kind of little confetti, a different texture, all those little lines, lots of texture. It's very different, and it's another way to contrast with that very even directional flow of the background loops. So extraordinary. This is all the same piece. This is all Spirits of the Lake. And this is a close-up of some of the feathers. You can see really well The mom says, glorious, the real bird feathers. I mean, what fun. That's what makes me think of Mary Oliver. When I think of those naturalist type poets, people who love walking and thinking and looking and observing and recording nature. You think if Henry David Thoreau was a hooker, we would be seeing stuff like this too. He was probably a great collector of found things, particularly organic things. So, I mean, it's part of the fun is the hooking. Part of the fun, I'm sure, is devising the composition, doing the composing. Part of the fun is choosing the colors. But you know what? Part of the fun is also taking a walk and finding all the feathers and the things to add. And isn't it wonderful when you can marry up all kinds of things that you love so much and be able to pop them, just bring them out in one piece like this? So Sandra's hooking is it's such a statement. It's a lifestyle, isn't it? It's more than just looking at a piece and talking about the composition. It's the way that she lives. It's her passion. It's the way that she sees. And this is a close-up. I'm going to take a swig of coffee. This is a close-up of a background that in this case I think could, well, I'm still thinking it's painted. Look at the greens, the way the greens kind of bleed. What are you thinking on this subject? And this is a great close-up of Clippy. Doesn't this make you want to give Clippy a try? I mean, I never do Clippy. I never do. I did for the book because I was showing a lot of techniques, but I never use it in my own pieces. And I'm thinking, you got to do it a little bit wider, right? You don't want to do like a number 3 in Clippy because it becomes Waldoboro. It just immediately becomes a soft pom-pom. But when you've got big wide pieces like this, you really see all those little, not dit dots in this case, all these little lines. And weirdly, it doesn't look pixelated, does it? It looks just like dense, very tactile texture. Sipping. This was one of these moments where, you know, I wish that I could have just stood there for a really long time. There was so much to see that was impossible. Now, what do you think of this background? This must be painted, right? And look at all the bling that's attached. So, you know, when you go to the stores, the dollar stores and the craft stores and all that, and you see all of this crafty yarn in the aisles, and you're thinking, man, who's gonna use that? People that are working with popsicle sticks, right? It's easy to get like on your high horse and think, well, that's like garbage stuff for kids, but it's really not. All of these interesting and exciting textiles, all synthetics, are beautiful and have their own place. And you can see in looking at the Green Mountain show how these kinds of materials can be applied to pieces that are unmistakably, you know, it's not even a debate, fine art, right? So it all has its place and it all has its use. And we are all magpies because this is a magpie craft. So it's interesting to think and look, even when you take a walk out, right? If you're going to go walk your dog or something like that and you start seeing feathers on the ground, you might want to think whether you plan to hook a realistic bird or not. You might want to start picking things like that up and just put them in a jar. Put them in a jar. Look at the little chest and the neck on this bird. You see how the Clippy, it's so dense and chopped up, but doesn't it look exquisite? Like little sprinkles, right? Having all fallen into the right place. It's just exquisite. Oops, wait a minute. I lost track. Hang on. I took a lot of this piece. It was a large piece. And coming back to the little chicks, there were chicks above on one of the adult birds' bodies, guilty of being a magpie. Dave, I know that you are. I love it. I know it. And you know, I hate myself for so many reasons, but often for throwing stuff out. I mean, you can't keep everything, right? You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to because if you do, they come to your house and start recording TV shows, and then you cry on camera, and everyone thinks you're crazy and you're exposed. So you can't do that. You just have to be a bit smarter about the way that you store all the garbage that you hold on to, right? Because you know that you're going to need it tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now, but you have to hide it from other people, don't you? That's the thing. You have to be a bit cunning and diabolical about the way that you do that. Otherwise, people will think you're crazy. But you do have to hold on to everything. I mean, we do. We all understand that, and we will validate each other. Crystal, either way, it's incredible. Absolutely, it is. Crystal says, from this angle, I think maybe the background isn't post-painted. There is zero bleeding between the loops. You know, you could be right. It was, even looking at it from an inch away, it was very hard to tell. Cat's Gallery. You are a magpie, too. I think we're all magpies, right? It's incredible. I'm just so curious, and I do want to do an experiment with painting loops versus hooking ombre. Um, because if you think about it, let's say it is ombre, like let's or not ombre, because ombre is really supposed to be just one color fading. Let's say that it's in the style of ombre, but there's multiple colors. Now, to achieve that with a piece like this, you would need a really, really long strip, and it would have to have very gradual color changes. Because when you think about it, as you hook, your strip becomes 4 or 5 times smaller. So if your strip is 5 feet long, which would be ridiculous, that would be as tall as I am, it would hook up into 1 foot, just to keep it simple, right? So if that were the case, and you've got these long shifts of color, you would need really distant color changes or many pieces of wool. And the thing with these directional backings, I'm going to say something naughty here. If I were hooking something that had a gradual color change in a background like this, that I wanted to look painted, but I was doing it with pre-dyed material, I would be very tempted to not leave my ends up. So if you're already a hooker, you know that we are trained to pull, first tail is up, last tail is up, all of the tails are up. In this case, I don't think that I would do that, particularly if I was making color changes in a very light background where any kind of shift or change or imperfection would disturb the overall look of the pile, because it's such a feature having it that even. I would be very tempted to put all of my tails down so that you didn't know that I ran out of the tan to white and I was transitioning into the sage to celery, if you see what I mean. What strange things that we say, right? But I think you know what I mean. It would be very tempting to do that. Um, and if she has done that, it's making it really hard to tell how she did it. We'll just say it's magic and leave it at that, right? Because magic is also good. Karen says, one of the solder classes I signed up for is with Cindy Gay, who is going to show us how to dye backgrounds like this. Great information. So that will be available at Solder 2023. Dyeing backgrounds. It could be, Crystal. It could be. See how three-dimensional these birds are against this backing? I mean, they really stand out in an extraordinary way. Let's move to the crested African crane. This is more of a portrait piece, a much smaller piece. A lot of the Vermonters and a lot of the people in the show are very much in the habit of putting their work into a frame. And I think that's a great solution to the how do I finish it project. If you are of the budget, of the wallet, where you can just drop it off at a framer and have them frame it, great. We saw a lot of Grace Collette pieces last week that were framed under glass. That worked too. So you can always leave it to a professional who knows about archiving stuff and knows materials and understands fumes and gases and all that stuff and is not going to do something stupid with your piece. But you can always have that done. That's a good option, framing something up. So this is crested African crane with a lot of the same techniques. You see that really blingy novelty yarn up top. You see that sort of peppermint or piano key, very Pearl McGown stripe at the bottom, kind of lifting up. That's one of the great McGown sampler stitches. It's a little bit of paisley, a lot of feathers. I think I have one more close-up of this animal. Yep. And in the cheek, we're looking at Clippy. So again, she's doing many different cuts here. Remember, Grace Collette did number 3, number 8. Let me see if I wrote something about this one. I know some of my... Yep, this is Crested African Crane. All of these are designed and hooked by Sandra Grant. And she says, I found some interesting shiny gold yarn for the crown, and I tried to incorporate the designs a Tasmanian family use in some of their clothing. I did black and white checks with a center design running up this side of this framed piece, 10 by 18. So she's not telling us the size, at least in that plaque. But, I mean, it certainly looks to me like probably a 4 in the background. And I would say more like a 7, the clippy part of the bird's face. Could be an 8. I don't think it's quite an 8. But really, really well done. And what a great technique, right, to be showing a background that's all looped, showing a foreground or the motifs that are all clipped. That is a really great strategy. This is Kingfisher. This is another small piece. Let me see if I have something on this guy. I don't have something on everything, and I'm sorry about that. It's me and the no, I do. It's me and the camera. Kingfisher is hooked, raised, and sculpted with yarns and wools. The background is a variety of wool, yarn, silk, metallic threads, and yarns. And this one is 8 by 8. So again, and do you see the shiny bit over on the right, like the fish, the silvery fish that is in Kingfisher's beak or bill? That is probably that metallic backed wool that the Green Mountain store sells. So take a look at that. Let's talk about that for just a second because you might be thinking to yourself, I would like that too. Now, there are two ways to get that kind of shiny material. The one that Green Mountain sells, it's metallic on one side. It almost looks like leather, very thin, and the back of it is wool, like a wool flannel, very thin. And it's very pliable and supple. So it hooks really well. It's a little bit on the more expensive side than the alternate that I'm about to describe as well, but it is the high end. It is the toppermost poppermost. It is a pleasure to work with. It has a limited color range. There are some sort of poison metallics like red, turquoise, bright green, but it's a lot of silver, platinum, gold, bronze, copper, that kind of thing. So a lot of true metallics. The other option for that metallic look is a company on Etsy. It's not just one company, but the one that I've shopped with quite a bit is called the Felt Pod, P-O-D. And they do metallic backed felt, so not wool. So it's the same thing, and it's probably the same exact material, but it's thicker because it's backed on felt, which is thicker like a sheet of felt. Good thing about that one, it's much less expensive and it comes in many more colors. Bad thing about that one, because it's thick, it is a little bit harder to pull through, and you definitely don't want your tails up because you just see the cross section, which in the middle, right, because it's a synthetic and it looks like leather, but it's obviously not, you see just white. So you don't want your tails up. You want all your loops down. It's much stiffer than the one that the Green Mountain sells, but it comes in more colors and it's less expensive. So it depends on what your plans are with it and how much of it you want to use. The good thing about both of those choices is that in the case of the Green Mountain, their like wool flannel backed metallics are either plaid or solids. And the color makes sense according to the color of the metallic front. Same thing with the felt pod. If you get bright fuchsia metallic, the felt is metallic too. So when you pull up your loop, if you should see the side of it somehow, it still looks like it's the right color. When you cut it, that's different because then you're seeing into like the core of it, the center of it, like cutting into like the bone. You're seeing the center. But they do hide well, is my point. So those are two great options. I'm sure that the one that Sandra's using here is from the Green Mountain because she's got very fine cuts. You can cut this with scissors. I cut this with my Bliss cutter. I don't think I would put this through the Sissix. It would just make me a bit nervous. And lots of beautiful blue feathers on this Kingfisher as well. Let's move to our next bird. You know what's funny? I just realized that, do you remember when we looked at this month's issue of Raw Cooking Magazine? That there was this great article on birds. It was all owls, wasn't it? Yeah, it was all owls, creatures of the night. Remember when we looked at this issue? And this was by projects and photography by Chris Antle, or Antley. Owl portraits, perfect for winter. And he goes through all different kinds of owls, right? Isn't that a funny coincidence? There's birds abounding right now. And this is such a great time of year to think about birds and look for birds, right? Have you seen that great movie? What is it called? The Best Year or something like that with Jack Black and Steve Martin and who's that really handsome guy? Well, I mean, there's lots, but somebody will know. Owen Wilson, maybe. And they're all going for this thing that I think it's called the Best Year, where they're all bird watchers. And it's like this international honor system way of trying to identify and locate the most birds of that year. And everybody's on this kind of race because they all appear at different times on different islands, on different parts of the world. So you have to have the funds to even participate in this because it's quite serious. But it's almost like an amazing race, but in a search for birds. It is wonderful. Very slow, very relaxing, very positive movie. I really enjoyed it. Sharon says, I've been saving all my Dove powder wash spray bottles to use with dyeing silk. There you go. I wonder if it would work with the background painting. So it would work. The thing with spray bottles, so you get spray bottles that have the squirt bottle. Those are the hairdresser bottles. The ones you're talking about, I think, probably have more of an atomizer thing. So depending on what the atomizer does, it either squirts and it's like free for all, just or it's a very focused squirt, or maybe you can adjust it so you can decide what kind of a squirt you want. This is getting weird, isn't it? Um, but so there's the atomizer squirt bottles, and there are the just open squirt bottles that you cannot be trusted at all. But there are also paintbrushes. You can have your color in any kind of a little pot, any kind of a little jar or little paper cup or whatever, and put a paintbrush in there very carefully. Choose the flat brushes, right? Choose the flat brushes to do this. Unless you want tiny, then choose like almost the Chinese brushes with the long, but if you want to do something focused, you want a long, small bristle head, right? Otherwise, if you're going loop for loop, go to the craft store and try to find a brush that has the width, a flat width, the size of the loops that you're cutting. So if you're cutting number 8s, make sure it's about as wide as an 8, and then you'll have the most success. That could be very controlled. If you're going to just blast and you're just going for like a spotted background, what you could do, depending on what the rest of the piece looks like, right? Say that you just had a blank canvas and you just were going to blast and just say, I'm experimenting with this. I'm going to see what happens. And I just want to create a background because I'm trying it out. And maybe later I'm going to applique on some pennies from a penny rug or some applique motif like a evergreen tree or something. So all I want to do is the background, and I don't have birds or other motifs to try to avoid while I blast my paint and experiment. Let's say we're doing that just for fun. If you were to do that, you could, in theory, right, paint however you wanted with crazy brushes or atomizers or sprays or anything, and then you could give it a little blast with the don't do this if you have a burlap backing, right, because of rotting, but you could blast it with like more water and more spray to water it down further. If you're working on monk's cloth, I would say do cotton if you're going to, just to be safe, right, just to be safe so that your backing's not going to fall apart. You don't want to accelerate that process. But it would be cool to see we've got to do this in a video. We've got to do this. It would be cool to see, even once you paint it, how much color you could then lift. And speaking of lifting, I'm going to stop and return to the slideshow. I was playing around yesterday with, because I'm waiting for a delivery from Door Mill, of wool. And I realized that I had a lot of wool that I didn't like in a pattern that I didn't like. I did a subtle spot dye, and I thought, if only I could lift these colors. And I went and used that color remover packet from Cushing, and that works really well. It smells like rotten eggs. It smells like a skunk, like sprayed into your nose while you were asleep. It's awful. It's like overpowering, but it works great. So I'm putting that through, and then I'm going to re-dye it, and then I'll probably use one of my textile soaps. I can never think of the name of the one that Eucalyptus, to get that smell out, because the smell is evil, but the product works great. I thought that's interesting because sometimes I test those things a little bit, and sometimes I put a little synthropol in to try to lift color when I feel like I've made a mistake. But this really lifts the color. Like it blanches it right back down. So it's good to know that those packets work because they're available all over the place, and I'm sure they're on eBay too because there are tons of vintage ones. Dave says, Fly Away Home, my favorite bird movie. Anna Paquin and Jeff Denny. I haven't seen that one. Oh, I'm going to have to remember that one. Dave, if you think of it, can you send me the name of it? I'm always looking for a nice peaceful movie with no violence to watch. That sounds perfect. Yeah, I think so. And then also, Sharon, those brushes that Amazon sells that are like an empty cartridge. It's like an empty plastic tool that's clear, and you fill it with water. So you can fill it with water, but you could fill it with water with a tiny bit of dye in it. And then you could squeeze if you want it to come out more, or hardly squeeze at all. It comes down these brush tips, and on Amazon they sell them in all different types of tips, from like a pen, like a calligraphy brush, to a very wide brush. You get the whole set. They don't really sell them singly, but they all have empty sort of cartridges, and you can see exactly how much is in there, and you could already put your dyed water in there, water with dye in there, and then you could be, that would be ideal. That would be, I think, the most ideal choice, because I think you would get the most control that way. These are all interesting ideas and stuff that needs trying. Thanks, Dave. All right, let's see. So this was mallard. Yep, this is mallard. Um, Another beauty. This one really struck me. There's lots of babies underfoot here. What a little sweetheart. So many feathers. I like how the feathers are often like pointing down. Like it's like they're decorative. Like she's not forcing the feathers to be in some kind of configuration like the real bird. I like how it's kind of like decorating a hat or something like that. You know, you're just adding them as like a token of the bird. I like the way they fall, right? That it's not forced and contrived. I love the background of this piece. Oops, don't do that, Mama. Wait a minute. Some close-ups of this piece, because you can see some of the different feathers that she used. You can see some of the different novelty yarns that she's used. You can see that clipped surface of the birds' bodies that she used. And in this piece, you can see the sky. This is extraordinary. I mean, it is, isn't it? This looks like it's definitely pre-colored and hooked. That blue is like so modeled, right? That's definitely not painted. But you see how she normally goes horizontal with her hooking, and this time she's going kind of like concentric circles. Like she's shaping it out a bit and creating a lot of interest with the different shelves of color. And of course the orange against the blue, always Van Gogh, always eternally perfect color combo, because they're perfect contrasts to each other on the color wheel. This piece is called Egrets, and let me see if I have some info. Hang on just a sec. Nope, I didn't write anything for those two. We'll keep going. So another great, I don't think I did a close-up of this piece. This was a very small piece, and lots of what looked like the curls again, lots of the metallic. So that silver yarn again, that's kind of like a ladder or eyelash yarn she's using there. She's using lots of the same material, but each composition is very different. This has such a fantasy feel to it. Sharon says my favorite color combos are oranges and blues. Yeah, I mean they're just, it's such a perfect match, isn't it? You know, when we think about the color combos that are opposite each other, orange and blue is a biggie, and also red and green is a biggie. But the thing with red and green is, unless you're really careful about the shades you're picking for the red and the green, they can look like holiday colors so easily. I think that's one of the reasons that we don't see as much red and green as we see orange and blues, because there's not that strong association with them. But of course, as soon as you go off center, off primary, you have a lot more color choices, right? And everything becomes a lot more interesting. This next piece is called Goliath Heron. Another extraordinary piece. You see, look for the kinds of repeats of motifs that she's doing, because this is a set, right? So as a set, it is meant to have, it should have, and it does have some continuity. So she's doing some similar thing with leaves that have kind of a paisley feel in the borders, and this kind of piano key or peppermint striping. She's doing a lot of fancy stitches. She's experimenting a lot. And when I say experimenting, she's not experimenting, she's an expert. She's showing us a variety of different directional hooking in the background. And sometimes it's hard to tell, is the background air, is the background water? Who cares, right? It doesn't matter at all. What matters is the beautiful shape of this bird, right? The hook of his bill and his neck going down to all of those lush feathers. You know, I don't know how she attaches the feathers, and I wonder, ooh, good question. That is just straight on hooks. We'll look at that closer up. I don't, you know, and I should have asked her. I didn't see her. I saw her before I went in and saw her rugs. And if I'd seen her after, I would have asked her a few things, right? But what was I going to say? I was going to say Kaz and I were starving at that point, and that Italian food was not going to eat itself. So we had like one foot out the door and the other on a banana peel at a certain point, because we were looking for hours and hours. But Oh, I lost it. Oh, how they were attached. I'm thinking just for myself, with so many feathers and so many tricky pieces to attach, it's got to be attached either with tacking some stitches here and there or glue. And I'm not thinking it's glue, although you could get archival glue and it would work. I wish I knew, just for my own sake and to be able to relate to you. Next time I see Sandra, I will definitely ask her because it's worth knowing. It's not obviously a feather is rigid, right? It has that kind of cartilagey veining in the center that is not super flexible or forgiving. It will bend, but it will come right back up. So curious to think of how she did all this. I would love to see the backs of these. Let's look a little bit closer at the eye, Sharon, and let's see what we can see. First, the border here. Um, just looking at the materials that she's using because it is a feast for the eyes. Oh, Barbara, good to see you. And I wonder if you all are getting that itch to check out the local craft store, the dollar store, because you always see these kinds of materials there. And sometimes I see them in Dave, I love that movie and the song 10,000 Miles. Oh, the song by the Proclaimers? Is that the Proclaimers song? I would walk 500 miles. Is that the same song? Very off key today. I'm not feeling great. But curious to see the colors that she's using, the materials that she's using, because I mean, for myself, I don't typically pick up khakis and grays, but you can see how much khaki and gray is in here. And it's so necessary, and it's actually so colorful, isn't it? Let's see if I have, no, I don't have the eye. I'm going to have to pull the eye up separately. I just wanted to show you a different angle so you could see um, what the body looked like. She's doing raised bodies, some more raised than others. Let's come back over here. I'm going to do this trick where I try to pull the picture open. So don't get seasick. If the motion's bothering you, just look away for a minute while I pull this eye wide open. There's another weird one for today. Yeah, this is just straight up hooking. She's got a small cut in there that's probably a 3. She's just careful about the way she's going around. It looks like she's working with all strips. If you feel like with stuff like this that the strips are not it's hard to make a circle is what I'm trying to say. I'm also looking at somebody outside who's delivering something. It's hard to make a circle, and when I feel like I've got such a small surface space and I'm trying to do this kind of a thing like an eyeball, I often switch to yarn if I have yarn that's the right color because I feel it's easier to work with than even a number 3 strip. But Sandra is much more of an expert than I am, so different song. Okay. Oh, Mary Chapin Carpenter. Oh, I'm going to have to check that one because I love her. My favorite song of hers is What If We Went to Italy? Side note. So this is hooked. This is difficult hooking. This is a practice kind of a thing. But if you're second guessing yourself, maybe do the pupil part or the yellow part in a very narrow cut and maybe do the rest of it in a black yarn. The yarn is so much more forgiving, right? You can do so much fooling around. And speaking of fooling around, let me get off the slide before we all fall off our seats and get so dizzy. And let's come to Bucky the Blue Heron number 3, Roman numeral 3. Another really grand piece with lots of color change. There's so much color shift here, much more of a tropical palette. Very warm mixed with icy cool. So that's interesting in and of itself, isn't it? When we see these like fiery colors, the yellow, the flame, the red, and we see it right alongside what look like very wintry colors, right? Very frosty colors. Interesting. I like how the flowers remain these warm greens, more toward the olive green, the yellow green. Interesting palette. It is very, very tropical look. So this is Bucky. I have to be careful when I say that. Bucky the Blue Heron, Roman numeral 3. Let's look. I think I have some more of this piece because this was another large piece that. No, not more of that one, but I have more of one of the other Buckies. This is Blue Heron in Flight. And this is a long, skinny piece. So this is the extent of it. You can see the sides of the frame, east and west. And interesting, the kind of border to it, a bit of a water border, has a bit of a Japanese feel to it, doesn't it? On the left-hand side, those shapes coming up reminds me of Japanese woodblock, right? Huge category of art there. On the right, more like waves, more like directional hooking like waves. Interesting. This one, again, looks painted to me in the background. There's not as many color shifts. This one was directly under a light, so I think it's catching the background a little bit more, giving us a few more clues. But what a beautiful bird. What a sweet little body. Look at the crook to the neck and the throat, and then that soft, round sort of fluff of a body shape with those little legs sticking out the back. Absolutely beautiful. And the eye is the very same. She has mastered the technique of this bird eye, so she is used to doing it at this point, getting that little ring of yellow with that inner circle of black and then that dit dot of white to give it that nice, lively, alive, and bright shine. This one is called Lovebirds, and this had a very high Waldoboro quality to it. I'm telling you, I'm just trying to. This program is so difficult because it's like dark gray on black. I'm always afraid I'm going to shut things off while I'm trying to show you the next slide. Lovebirds is just a beautiful composition. I love the sort of suggested heart shape between the birds' necks. I can't tell what they're doing here. I don't know enough about birds. Birds are like gardens for me. I need to learn more, and I want to learn more, but I haven't yet. I wonder if this is some kind of rating. What rating is this? Mating ritual, I wonder. It's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful moment captured. The way that the flowers are scrolling up behind the birds, it's just framing the birds beautifully. And it is absolutely right and perfect to use a good color changing background, right? There are two distinct parts to the background. And the horizon line, which is not a horizon line, right, because it's a very abstract background, is rising up over the heads of the birds and leaving space for these kind of calla lily shaped flowers, a bit of more of an erotic shaped flower, right, really fitting for the subject of this, which is love and lovebirds. But again, a lot of clippy, some feathers coming toward us. They're just such lively pieces. Maybe they are egrets. I don't know. They could be. The green is throwing me. I mean, at least around here, the egrets do have like a mark on their face like that, but it's always like brown, black. The green, I don't know. I don't know. I think all of you probably know better than I do on the subject of birds. I just wanted to show you a little close up too of this side because you can see how much clippy she's got going on in the bodies. Karen says, interesting how most of her pieces she has divided out part of the background. Yeah, it is interesting because oops, I did it again. It's interesting because it's a very simple trick and it's extremely effective. And we're not usually getting a horizon line going across the horizon, like flat, like horizontal. The nature of a horizon line being horizontal. We're hardly ever getting that. And I think one of the reasons this has such like an Asian quality to it, many of these pieces, is because we keep getting a diagonal horizon line, and that is a very Asian trick. And also the shapes, right? When we see something like this, we are thinking of the East, not the West. So, and of course, the suggested kind of paisley, the feathers, the leaves, it's all bleeding into the same idea, that shape in the bottom corner. Coming up, and then the kind of light blue is kind of like a river, right? I'd go for a river on that, and then it's kind of wild sunset sky. But absolutely, Karen, she is breaking it up very simply. And if you think about this in terms of composition, if you wanted to do something like this and you have a bird that visits your bird bath or a bird that you look out for when you're taking your walks, just think about a composition where you are not putting in a horizontal horizon line, and instead you're putting in 1, 2, 3 sections of diagonal, and then you're just dropping either the entire bird or a crop of the bird into the composition. And it's going to work great. It's going to work great. And then it's just a question of what techniques do I want to bring out? You can see how Waldoboro, I think I have more of this one. This is Bucky the Blue Heron 2. Yeah, I have more close-ups of this one. Bucky the Blue Heron must be a character that she sees often. I just wanted to pull you in to see even the hooked parts. There are some huge height changes, and that adds to the variety, which always adds to the interest. Did she hook any magpies? I don't think so. I don't think so. It might be that she did, not in the pictures that I took, or it might be that she has rather. These are all Bucky still. And another good close-up of the eye and the background. This is white egret. Okay, so this is a different piece. I'm sorry. I think this is from this next piece. This one's called white egret. I reversed those. Um, very similar composition, but you see how instead of just being the bottom right hand corner for the leaf paisley motif, on this one it rides all the way up. And you see how the river is functioning almost as a ribbon. It's very abstract in shape. It has kind of a 70s feel, right? 70s art. We look at this kind of brutalist shape, right? We are revisiting the idea of brutalist art in the 70s by pulling these shapes like flames, dragging them up, drawing them up, and bringing in the flame colors, I think, is also adding to that feel. It's just a really, really good effect. And I hate to say trick, but maybe trope is a better word, right? This is what we do in the design classes. We look at the work of a specific artist and say, what are the things that they did over and over and over again? Because those things are what give this body of work its distinct character and make it feel synonymous with the artist, right? So when you're as good as Sandra is, you're just doing this on your own. You have evolved this. I'm certainly more of a jack of all trades, and I try different things in each piece. But you can see how she has really drilled in, and she has found what she likes, and she does it so expertly that it's just crazy. These are all from that last one. This is velvet. So velvet is wonderful to hook with. I know a lot of people hook with the stretch velvet, like the velvet hook, but a lot of people also hook with the not stretch velvet. And I'm interested in trying that. The not stretch velvet is much softer. I have a lot of it. It has no stretch. I'm not talking about velveteen or something like that. I'm talking about not cotton velvet. So velveteen cotton velvet would be horrific to pull through. You'd probably lose the entire pile pulling it through, like giving birth to each strip. But with the softer velvets, like silk velvets, the really high-end velvets, they fray nice, right? I mean, it would give a nice effect, more like sort of a paisley, like a raggedy taggedy edge to it because it frays so nicely. I'm curious about. I have a lot of it, and I haven't worked with it yet. And I don't kit it because it's really too expensive to put into kits for me. It doesn't really make sense because it's not something that I am producing at this point. Maybe in 2023. This piece is called Elmwood, Elmwood. So obviously this is a bald eagle, and this is a very stirring and patriotic piece. Lots of emotion, lots of energy, lots of color. Just a beautiful piece. It looks like the eagle at some kind of a waterfall. Fish, maybe he's getting ready for a meal kind of a thing. It's just another extraordinary piece. Very bold, very eye-catching. Let's look at some more of this closer up as we come to the end. You can see she's using some of these holographic and metallic strips. So there could be two different things going on here. The golds to me look like they might be metallics, but the blues look like they're more like holographics. So we'll talk more about those in the future. I'm going to start stocking holographic stuff, probably not the metallics, because I can't produce that myself. This is something that you can produce on your own if you want to. So how do you do it? Say you do want to do like a holographic strips and you're like, I don't want to buy it, I want to make it. If that's the case, then you need to go to Joann's or Michael's and find that, this isn't it, but find the material that looks like cellophane. It's like tissue paper. It looks like tissue lame, but it's transparent but highly holographic. And get some two-sided interfacing, so double-sided interfacing, right? Fusible, both sides. And choose a piece of wool that you like. Choose whatever piece of wool that you like. It could be solid, it could be mottled, and put them together in a little love sandwich there. Turn it over with your iron and fuse it from the wool side. Obviously, you cannot fuse it from the super synthetic side. Fuse it from the wool side, and you will have that holographic stuff fused to your carrier, which is the much sturdier wool, and you'll be able to hook with that. Beautifully, you'll be able to hook with that. I will start making that because I feel like that's something easy that I can make that I should have in stock because I use blingy stuff a lot. But you can make it too. You don't need me for that. So a few more backgrounds to Elmwood, and I'm coming to the end here. I want to kind of look at the last ones that I had of Sandra's because they're just so pretty. 3 cardinals. Another piece with, again, the same kinds of breakdowns that we're talking about here. We're becoming kinds of experts on her work at this point, I feel. There's so much to know, right? It's like, it's a huge body of work, and every piece is extraordinary and unique. But you can see technique-wise, the further we look at this exhibit, the more we understand the different techniques that she's using. And this is like teaching in a way, right? Being able to look and say, okay, I see what the materials that are happening here. It demystifies the whole thing, doesn't it? Because when you look at oh, it's really windy out. That's the wind, if you're wondering. When you look at pieces like this, sometimes it's overwhelming. um, you just look at it and you go, there's so much happening there. I could never do that. And then you spend a little time and break it down and you realize, yeah, maybe I could give it a try. There's a lot of three-dimensional pieces too of hers, like these here. The big piece is called Big Baby Great Horned Owl, and the smaller one is called Feed Me Baby. So smaller pieces that were hanging up on the wall, and then these large shaped pieces that were both flying above us and kind of attached to a tree that was part of the installation. So I took some pictures of those kinds of things, the kind of three-dimensional things like this. She'd created some lovely naturalist vignettes with little bits of tree trunks and little eggs and things like this, and it was just so whimsical, so charming. And there was a lot of text too, which was just lovely. I really liked this piece. This is called Wood Duck in Flight. Oh shoot, wait a minute, I lost my place. What I loved about him is his colors. He reminded me, Mom, of when Dad used to take that night class in carving decoys, and Dad's decoys were like not good, but they were so cute and colorful, and he made them. So it kind of reminded me of those days, Dad's decoy days. And then I think we have barred owl, not barn owl, but barred owl, I think is our last one here. This is kind of like a bit of a, oh no, Karen, you're going to miss Sunday night. Catch up on Monday. Going to a Pentatonics. Oh, the Pentatonics. How fun. Holiday concert. Oh, I'm so sorry about the shift. I can't miss seeing Pierre's show. I missed his talk last month. I can't miss his show because he's just such a stellar star. And his star is really on the rise. And I want to bring all that to you next week. So that's probably what we'll do on Monday is look at that show. Very sort of socially and politically charged work. So interesting, contemporary, and of the now. So I will miss you though, Karen. I'm going to use your pieces for sure. This is Barred Owl, and this is a nice kind of a celebration of a bunch of things we've been talking about. We've got the clippy face, we've got the application of the different kinds of fibers and feathers, and then we've got this color shifting background that we can only speculate on. But it is so different, and it is such a rich background. This is another small piece, but you can see there's so much to it. What an exhibit, right? Completely amazing. So that was all the work of Sandra Grant, and I do have so much more stuff to show you. So we'll look at that next week too. It's just so hard to get to it all. It was so much. It was so much. But I thought it was worth doing episodes on the people who are featured this year because, of course, every year it's going to be different, and we don't want to lose track of these great featured artists because it's a good chance for us to dig in. So today it was Sandra Grant, and I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to not Friday night, but Sunday night is cocktail night. In case you joined us late, Sunday night is cocktail night this week, and it is also gallery night. So be sure that you're sending me your work, your projects, your thoughts, your ideas, even if it's not something to show, if it's a question or something that you want me to bring up, do it, send it. We want your work. We want to discuss it. We'll go over everybody's stuff, and we'll have a great Sunday night. I am teaching on Sunday during the day, but there is enough time for a transition. So if you're in Connecticut, I am teaching a Helen Albee kind of punch needle path through the mountains, right? Sort of a Native American design and punch. And then I will be with you on Sunday night. And if you are in Connecticut, think about going to the Charter Oak on Friday night for the textile show. It's Pierre Sylvain and one other artist. It looks like there's some quilts there and some hook drugs there, but everything is textile. I think it's called Spirit of the Textile. But it's on our Facebook page too, which is Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club. Patreon members, as soon as I finish these Advent calendar villages and box them and get them out, which should be today, I'm going to be sending you something hopefully tonight. I wanted to give you another free pattern this month as a huge thanks for your support, continued support and patronage and all that stuff. I will see you all on Sunday night for cocktail night, or maybe sooner. And in the meantime, you can reach me at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com.